out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube. We're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And now for today's topic.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, and we're going to be discussing the fate of second-generation anticoagulant, rodenticide, the status of AB 1788 in California. And before I do that, I want to remind the audience, hey, we got a lot of things on the website that I want you to look at. We are putting together the Pest Geek Academy. That's on the works. It's coming soon. Realistically, it's going to be probably the end of the year, but I have created a temporary, like a syllabus of what's going to be on there. Go to the website, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out the training section. And there you're going to be able to see a syllabus of what we're putting together for new technician training. It's going to be a new course. We're looking probably about 13, 14 lesson course that we're going to be putting together for new technicians. And this will be even great for even already technicians that you've hired. We're looking at making this really, really affordable for you guys. It's going to be a lot cheaper than anything else on the market right now because we understand that a lot of what you can't afford is that initial training, especially if you're hiring your first guy. This is from a guy who knows about hiring his first guy because we've hired a lot of first guys. And the training is very extensive, but I think it's going to be worthwhile looking into that. The other thing we're looking at is if you want to blog, you want to write an article, we have a space for you to write an article on our website. You don't even need to ask us for permission. Don't send me a message about what you want to write. Just go ahead and write it, and we'll publish it. If it's a good article, if it's scientifically based, if it's written by a PMP that knows what he's talking about, we will publish it. I'm getting blasted by marketers wanting to write articles to get, backlinks to their blog. We're not interested in that. We provide quality content that is scientifically based. It is not marketing material. We want to educate customers. We want to educate end consumers on the real stuff, but we can't put it out there because the marketers are putting out 20,000 pieces of information that nobody it's really useless, doesn't work. And then second of all, the universities have the information and nobody's reading it. So you're in a catch-22 all the time. What do we do about it? We write good content that people want to read, that is very solid, that can get SEO'd, and then we can get it out there. What else is on the podcast? Oh, we created 3 new groups. So if you go to the Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group, we've made that officially for the listeners of the podcast who are wanting to discuss the issues that I pose on the podcast. And what I want to do is there are a lot of people in this industry who want to be marketers. They want to sell, if I wanted to be a marketer and I wanted likes and shares and I wanted to explode things, I'd just talk about product. I would just be talking about product. I would be in a products podcast and a products group and talk about product because everybody wants to talk about product. I mean, you put out a post I've been in pest control now 13 years and I officially stopped using 2 years ago. It's going to be, I think 2 years, almost more than that, where I stopped using bifenthrin. And there's still the major topic of discussion. Somebody puts up, who's using bifenthrin? You get 1,000 people commenting on bifenthrin. It's like it's talked about to death for real. We need to move on, and we need to talk about things that are really impacting the guys who really want to grow, who are serious. That's what my podcast is about. That's what my platform is about. That's my what we're doing. So we got a very limited platform of people that actually want to engage in that type of conversation and have the open, honest, rational, scientific-based, not emotional, knee-jerk conversation about the issues that we're facing in our industry. The stuff that people openly aren't talking about in any other platform. And it's about education. It's about training. It's about really getting, how are we going to grow our businesses? What are the real numbers? Things that nobody wants to talk about, that nobody's talking about. I'm going through a journey and I'm putting out what I know, what I'm struggling with, what I'm dealing with, to help those that want to get in, want to succeed, and want to get ahead in this industry. And this podcast that we're talking about is going to exemplify the exact problem that we're having in our industry. Okay. And what we're going to be talking about is in California, which is the what is known as the Rodenticide, or the second generation ban bill, which is really what it is. It's a second generation ban bill on all second generation rodenticides in California for commercial use. That does not include agriculture. So when you look at the law is targeting basically pest control companies now. And why are they targeting pest control companies? Well, if you look at the original issue that we had, where the EPA back in 2008 basically did what is known as the EPA's rodenticide risk mitigation decision in 2008, in May 28, 2008. And now we have what is known as the result of that, where we have better stations and things like that to protect children and pets and reduce the overall exposure to non-target organisms. In other words, animals that weren't intended to be killed, like a rat, was the intent that we wouldn't be targeting other pests. Unfortunately, they're still finding levels of second generation rodenticide. Seems to be the biggest ones that they're finding in mammals. And if you've listened to a lot of the information that's already been shared on wildlife that Stephen is doing, explaining, there's a great podcast on that I urge you guys to listen to, on the understanding rodenticides. And I'm not going to get into the technical part of that, because he does a way better job at that than I do. That is one of the ones you need to go back and listen to understand the difference between first and second generation anticoagulant rodenticides and rodenticides in period. But this decision was made, and now California went and took it a step further in 2014. In 2014, they banned the sale completely of second generation rodenticides, anticoagulant rodenticides, to over-the-counter to residents. So in other words, individuals could not buy it over the counter. If you go on Do My Own, it says, cannot be shipped to California. I mean, they're not shipping it. They're not sending it. Obviously, there's probably still thousands of blocks out there remaining in the marketplace and in people's homes that they bought, one of those big giant buckets to keep in their home, and they're probably still there. I mean, the rodenticide's probably gotten rancid by now from keeping it so long, but nevertheless, it was banned from over the counter. And now what California tried to do, well, not California, the entire state, but primarily Richard Bloom, assembly member for District 50 in California, decided to put a bill out called AB 1788. He's from Santa Monica, California. He's a Democrat, and basically it is the ban on second generation rodenticides, targeting now basically what is the pest control industry, because they already have a ban on over-the-counter sales of it to citizens, to homeowners, which I don't think it's all that bad of an idea, to tell you the truth. But now you have the attack on the pest control industry. This was really an attack on the pest control industry, because it was, if you look at the law, agriculture is exempted. So basically, it's over the counter and pest control companies, which probably amounts to 75% of the rodenticide use. Because when you look at the statistics of agricultural rodenticide use in this case, and I've said it before in other cases that agriculture uses way more insecticide, but when you look at the global data and the national data, it's about 25%. Pest control by actual pest control companies, somewhere around 35 when you look at the data. And when you look at the other data of what's being used in warehouses, in commercial buildings, and in things like that, and by homeowners, it's the other part. So really, it's a ban on the pest control industry from using second generation. And then we wonder, well, what is, if you look at the data of, between first generation and second generation, what is the real speed of it killing a rodenticide? 1 to 2 days difference. From, between 3 and 5 days to 3 and 7 days. I mean, you're looking at it but what you're looking at is what happens when you have a resistance issue to a first generation rodenticide that you can't control that population, or you're not controlling it. And that's a problem. And it's a tool that we have. The problem with tools is that it tends to be overused. We know that. You can't argue that point with me. You can't get mad at me and say the problem is overuse, because the overuse of a cheap product, when it becomes cheap, is rampant. And what we're looking at is the data that they got, that in spite of the efforts that California made in 2014, the numbers don't seem to be decreasing of the exposure. Well, it's such a small, people are using rodenticides outside of professional and commercial use, that it looks like it hasn't made an impact. And what they're saying is that sometime between 1999 and 2009, and more recent data, depending on species, 70 to 90% of the population of predator species, such as raptor, owls, hawks, eagles, foxes, raccoons, coyotes, bobcats, and mountain lions, have been exposed to high levels of anticoagulant rodenticides throughout the state of the animals tested. And then they say that we got like 17 studies to show that this is true. And there's a lot of studies out there showing that this is true. Okay. You've got, I got at least 7 here discussing it. One of the interesting articles, and here's the problem when you're dealing with bans, is you have to take in consideration what the long-term impact is going to be on then exploding rodent populations in urban areas, and the diseases that come with them, like hantavirus. So there's an article, there's a study, cities and the environment, and there's a study that they did the use of anticoagulant rodenticide in single-family neighborhood along an urban wildland interface in California. Well, in this community, only about 40 residents completed the survey this is in San Fernando Valley, and 20 residents that completed the survey in the Bel Air, Hollywood Hills. So very small sample. However, what was shocking to these guys is that the use of rodenticide was not, the majority of the residents reported that the improper application of rodenticides by their survey was done by them, and that it was not done really by PCOs. We asked here's what the quote, I'm quoting from the article. We asked the same information from pest control operators in the area. Okay? And what they discovered was that it was primarily the misuse of rodenticide was by residents. No kidding. Why? Because there really is no fine and no repercussion for a resident inappropriate using a rodenticide, even though they violated the label law, and even though the EPA can fine them up to $25,000 and a year in prison for the misuse of a rodenticide. There has really never been a case that I know of where a resident has been fined. I can't find it anywhere. But if you're in certain states and an inspector kicks your case and that case moves and there's rodenticide inside, the inspector can say, no, that needs to be anchored to the ground and I can't move it, even though the rodenticide is secured inside the case, even though you completely complied with all the label directions. In our state, we want it staked to the ground. It cannot move from there. A weighted box is not enough in some states. AG inspectors can go into a facility and say, nope, the population in this facility is way too high of rodents. I don't want them 30 feet. I want them 15 feet apart. And an inspector can do stuff like that because it's within the label. And we would put them at 30 feet. So there are things that happens in our industry that nobody knows about. And the majority of the illegal application is always going to be a homeowner. I mean, how do all those kids that get reported by their parents into emergency rooms, we don't hear of all of a sudden there was, and the pest control company did it. No, nobody gets charged. Nothing happens. But if a pest control company would have done that, they would have never recovered from the negative PR. They would have been destroyed. You see, that's the problem that we have. That's the issue. So California took it and say, we're going to get rid of it. No, it hasn't been enough of an impact. We're going to institute a bill which was co-authored, or it was authored by Richard Bloom, but we have also Laura Friedman of District 43, assembly person, and Henry Stern of District 27, a senator who co-authored or co-introduced this bill, and they're calling it a common sense approach to a total ban. Here's what the introduction to the bill reads. This bill would create the California Ecosystem Protection Act of 2019. There you go. It's called the Ecosystem Protection Act of 2019. And they talk about everything that I've talked about in the last several podcasts regarding rodenticides. And here is in item number 5 of the bill, in section number 1, part number 5, scientific research and state studies have found rodenticides in over 75% of animals tested. These rodenticides led to direct mortality or chronic long-term health impact for natural predators, non-target organisms, and endangered species. And further steps are needed to reduce rodenticide exposure in non-target animals. And it goes into the what they understand about, according to the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, 90% of tested mountain lions, 88% of bobcats, 85% of protected Pacific fisheries tested. 70% of the northern spotted owl tested was positive for about having rodenticides. Well, how are they getting the rodenticides? They're not getting it directly from going into a station and eating the rodenticide. That is not the case. How these animals they're eating A rat eats the rodenticide, the rat dies. The half-life of that product is in the rodent. Another animal eats it. An owl eats the rodenticide, eats the rat that ate the rodenticide, and then a mountain comes along and eats the spotted owl that ate the rat that ate the rodenticide. That's so people understand that it's not the direct rodenticide of somebody throwing it out there and everybody eating it. That, although that is so common, and that's my biggest beef that I have with rodenticides. Because they're not like insecticide that you spray on an area. These are, but it's the half-life of second-generation rodenticides that is an issue. That is the problem that the industry or the manufacturers are up against. We're not up against that. We're up against obeying the label law. They're up against that if this happens, a big state, which is probably the largest state that consumes pesticides or rodenticides in the union. You got Texas, California, and California, Texas, Florida, and California as one of the biggest consumers of pest control in the country because of population. It's just simple numbers. Urban population. And so the bill, excuse me, I'm battling a cold, and I've been battling a cold for over a month now. And every time my kids get sick, I get sick. And so the bill pretty much has stalled right now. It's been put, on hold. Probably won't be taking up again until 2020. But the issues, this bill isn't dead. This is not going to go away. They're not going to give up that easily. Basically, But, where do we have a problem now if you take a certain rodenticide like that? Could the industry still deal with the rodent problems that it faces to control them and control the public health? Understand that it isn't an issue about killing rodents. An article was written right after this. I mean, on the bust of this in California. Yeah, the Sacramento Bee wrote an article titled "As Rats Overrun California Cities, State Moves to Ban Powerful Pest Killers." How's that for a headline grabber? What funny was, here's the funny part about the article. In the California EPA building in downtown Sacramento, there's a playground. Well, they had to close that playground, and this is for state employees' kids to play in that playground while, I guess, their parents are at work and there's a daycare center there or something. I don't know the specifics. But they closed down the playground for fear that kids were going to contract the disease. And they had to set out second generation rodenticides. This is in the California EPA, Cal EPA building in downtown. They had to put out second generation rodenticides to control the problem. So, what gives? And this, then you have one of their own congressmen in their own state saying we're going to ban it all, but they're having to use it. They didn't go with a first generation, not according to the article. And it would ban it also in the use. Not only would it ban it for commercial use, it would ban it in all government properties. And that's where the industry is, and that's why you need to keep an eye on California. Well, the problem obviously is very, very serious, that the bobcats are needing legal defense. There's a legal defense fund for animals called the Animal Legal Defense Fund, founded in 1979 in California. And they're the ones supporting this bill. I mean, they're also supporting it. They're supporting it on their website. By the way, I got links to all this. I got about 20 links I'm going to put on this post for you so that you can see it all, get all the information, because you need to get involved. So, you have the impact. Where are the studies? Okay, I'm going to give you some of the studies. All right. The impact of rodenticides and insecticide toxicants from marijuana cultivation sites on fisher survival rates, on fisher survival rates in the Sierra National Forest in California. So obviously they need to control rodents or they will get high, because they will get high on the plant supply. So that, we need to control rodents, because you don't want, high rodents running around California. You've got enough people doing that in California. Anticoagulant rodenticide exposure in urban populations of the San Joaquin kit fox. And there's a study on that. Exposure of non-target wildlife to anticoagulant rodenticides in California. And here is one of the bigger ones that you probably need to read. Is an investigation of anticoagulant rodenticide data submitted to the Department of Pesticide Regulation. That is a very good one to read to understand where the data is coming from. Anticoagulant rodenticides on our public and community lands, spatial distribution of exposure and poisoning of rare forest carnivores, and cause of mortality and unintentional poisoning and predatory and scavenging birds in California. And that it goes on from there. What we got to understand is that rodenticide use is not going down nationally. It's going up. Rodenticide, according to Business Wire, which is a Berkshire Hathaway company, has a study. If you're interested in the study, I think the price for that study ranges somewhere around $3,000 to $4,000. And so if you're interested in the growth market of rodenticides, it's estimated to reach $5.9 billion by 2025. The rodenticide market. And I think this is globally. Currently it's at $4.7 billion in 2019. What is the drivers of increased rodenticide use? Well, increasing rodent population, urbanization causing rat displacement. They're calling impact of climate change on breeding of rats, and increasing damage due to rodent attacks. Now, I just did a podcast where I said, I don't particularly will sell rodenticides basically as a solve all problem when there is an opportunity to solve that problem with exclusion. Obviously, a bunch of you blew up at that. And you blew up at it because you were like, prove to me the risk. And none of you that listened to that podcast that challenged me on the risk ever pointed out the benefits of doing exclusion and doing sanitation, which is, by the way, what NPMA teaches as integrated rodent management in their training. It's exclusion and sanitation first, then trapping, then rodenticide. That's what they're teaching. And that is the approach we've taken in our practice. And we solve 99% of all the rodent problems that we encounter. When I did a survey on several different posts, how many rodents do you actually remove from a building? No, we need it because, it's the majority of the problem. How many rodents do you remove? 1 to 3 is 50%. And what I've proven over 12 years of doing this, obviously in a limited environment, I'm talking about my environment here in Florida. I understand construction. I've worked in the home improvement business for a very long time. I've actually sold. Usually, you don't know what it's like here in the Midwest. Actually, I do. I sold millions of dollars worth of siding to homes, not commercially, but residentially. And I understand the construction. It's much harder to do rodent control in London than it is to do it in New York. That's a fact. You don't have 300-year-old buildings in New York. You don't have a 300-year sewer system. Much harder. And then you're going into the Midwest, and yes, you have wooden homes. And certain, the cost to do exclusion in one of those homes that are 100 years old, that's worth $100,000, is probably $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. It could be run easily to do exclusion. And what the conversation is headed is the fact that you can't convince customers to spend $1,000 on exclusion. So it is understood, in quotes, and I'm going to go on here on a limb, in quotes, that it is understood that you can't get 100% rodent control by using rodenticides alone. It is understood. It is understood by who? Well, it's understood by the client. No, the client doesn't understand it. The client will live with it. The client will tolerate it. The client doesn't understand it. The client expects that if you put rodent stations out, and this has been on 12 years of experience in dealing with customers, not dealing with the science, that if we put rodent stations out, that it's automatically going to control the problem, and the client is no longer going to experience a rodent problem. And we can explain that till we're blue in the face to the client, and the client is still going to say, yeah, but. When I did rodent control in a shopping center for a specific restaurant, and my entire hand fits on the door, and he continues to have mice inside the restaurant, and I tell him all we have to do is put you on 2 doors, and it's going to cost you $150. He's like, no, I'm not going to pay for it. But yet he spent $150,000 and is producing $50,000 to $70,000 a month in restaurant sales in 3,000 square feet of restaurant. Totally made no sense to him. This is what the industry, the world, it is so dominated by the thinking of chemical first. The same way that the medical industry now is looking at everybody wants a quick fix pill to solve all of their problems, where sanitation and exclusion isn't really taken into consideration. And even if you tell the client you can't have overspill of all this garbage on the floor because you're going to have rodents, they still don't clean it. Pass by any restaurant in America, drive by their dumpster, and see what you see as a homeowner, as a professional, and tell me if I'm exaggerating. Just drive by the dumpster of a restaurant that's less than 20 feet away from the building, and there's overflow constantly because they won't pay for a daily pickup. They want it every 3 days because it costs too much money to pick up the garbage every 3 days. Every other day or every day, have it picked up. The cost has to be mitigated, but you'll live with rodents all over your garbage. And you want more rodent stations to compete synthetically with a food that's already there. That's my challenge. Prove me wrong. Go to my group and have the discussion in my group about what I am talking about. You can't argue with the facts. You can only come up with your emotions. And you get all emotional about losing the rodenticides. Yeah, we got to, you're talking like this and we're going to lose our product. I'm going to prove to you that the industry doesn't put its money where its mouth is. And I'm challenging you to do that. The global rodenticide market, I don't know where they're getting these numbers. These numbers are kind of conflicting. But Grand View Research says it's estimated at 748 million. Now, the EPA, to their credit, the NPMA did stand up on this. They have to. And they even have a training on their website called new NPMA Rodenticide Stewardship Training Course. Here's what they're prepping you for. If this verbiage doesn't sound familiar, look at Europe. Look at Europe. What happened in Europe? Everybody had to get certified and licensed to apply rodenticide. Farmers had to get licensed and certified to apply rodenticides. That's where we're going. There's going to be, obviously, whatever happens in California doesn't stay in California. An interesting article, I'm going to prove to you that you don't put your money where your mouth is. You'll go on a group. Here's what I'm challenging you with, the industry. You will go on a group and you will bellyache about it, but when it comes to actually doing something about it, you won't do a darn thing. This is why you can't use polls and you can't use data to make decisions on what you're going to do, because what I've learned from data is that people say one thing, but yet they do another. There's a book which I think you guys should all read. It's called Dataclysm. And the shocking amount of data that's being collected. But what the data shows consistently is that people say one thing and yet they do another. PCT Magazine ran an article, All Eyes on California. I highly suggest you read it. It's a good article. This one was written in August, just recently, August of 2019. But what shocked me was the fact that they did a survey among their readers. And they asked, how important are second generation anticoagulant rodenticides to your rodent control business? 1% had no answer. 44% said very important. 14% said not important at all. And 41% somewhat important. That's interesting. 44% very important, 41% somewhat important. Not important at all. Have you lobbied on behalf of the SGARs? Have you and your company lobbied local, state, federal officials on the benefits of it? Only 13% said yes. 86% said no. Again, you'll go on a group and I will say something like, you don't need rodenticides to control the majority of the problem. And what are the risks and benefits? And everybody jumps down my throat saying, yeah, but prove to me the risk and prove to me that, and you get all passionate about it. Yet when it comes to actually doing something about it, you don't do a darn thing. Involvement in lobbying. How would you describe your level of involvement in advocating for lobbying in support of continued use of insecticide and rodenticide use by pest management professionals? 10% very involved. 34% said somewhat involved, yet 56% said not involved at all. You see, when I poll people, when I do research, and a lot of you, in groups, and a lot of you admins, you text message me about how I'm out of line. I prove to you every day. And I'm proving it to you here. And this isn't me saying it. This is your own industry magazine surveying you, and you're saying it. So if you're not involved and you don't care and you're not doing anything about it, and then when you lose the product, you cry and you bellyache and you roll on the floor and you do the dying cockroach routine, and you lose the products, you've got no one to blame but yourself. See, belly aching in groups isn't activism. It makes you feel good for a moment. And this is why I post what I post and I don't take anything seriously, because it doesn't. I understand data analytics. I understand interpreting. I've been dealing in sales since I was 16. I understand emotions. 70% of my job in dealing in pest control is not performing a pest control business, a pest control service. It's dealing with emotions. It's dealing with the customer's emotions. It's dealing with the customer service aspect of the business. 70% is in interaction with people, believe it or not. So here's what I'm going to do for you and see how many actually, and I'd be interested in NPMA talking to me about what we can do to help them, because I think this is where you need to get involved. And what happens that there is on NPMA's website, I'm going to have a link. It's called Public Policy, Take Action, Take Action. And it's on Bill 1788, which is Take Action on the bill. And there is, for you to sign a petition, it's very easy. You go online and you basically send the message. You put in your information and you hit send, and there is a pre-made body message already done for you. And do it. How many of you have actually done this? I posted it in groups. I got crickets. Again, great at belly aching. No action. And that's what you need to do, is you need to, and people are like, I'm a goat, man. I'm happy being who I am. You may disagree with me. You may not like what I said, but go on the facts on 90% of what I put out and argue with me on it. Because you can take one little point. I have more people criticizing my grammar than criticizing my content. Oh, it was so horrible. I could not continue to read it. Yet you commented on it. And people think I got a sense of humor, guys. You have no idea. I'm a class clown. At home, I'm intolerable. My wife does not know how to deal with me when it comes, because I take very few things seriously. But I know how to get your goat. And people think like I'm being just a jerk, and then I'm like hard, and I'm no, you don't understand. I'm pointing out the obvious. And I'm pointing out what's happening in our industry. And I'm pointing out where we need to go. And I'm talking about the things that other people can't talk about. PMP Magazine can't talk about it, really, like I can. Too many interests. They can't disagree with something. They can't disagree with the manufacturer. They can't do, their hands are tied. NPMA, hands are tied. Me, I'm a podcaster sitting behind a microphone. And I can pretty much talk about what I want to talk about, because this is basically a commentary of my experience and what I understand and what I see. And I can talk about it because I don't have my income tied to this. You always know, follow the money. And there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of things that people can't talk about. We can talk about it openly. In my group, a lot of people talk about it openly. I never get upset at anybody for disagreeing with me and getting angry at what I post. Most of the time, I'm laughing. I invite you to have the dialogue with me. Most of you know that I'll text you back if it's getting intense. I say, look, bro, you're taking this too far, because this is not my intention. I'm not upset about this. And I have to calm them down because they think I'm just ripping. No, it's just that, understand, I got heavy thumbs. But if you sit down and talk with me and you meet me and you get to know my heart and you get to know who I am, you realize that it's not even close to what I appear on social media. So I invite the dialogue. Here's what I'm going to leave you with. Get involved. Go to MPMA. Fill out that form. Take action. Get involved. The next time they take a survey, I would like to hear that it increased. And the last thing I want to leave you with is, where the industry is going to go, and we can't change it. We can't do a lot of this. This is a manufacturing problem of creating third generation and alternative rodenticides that are more environmentally responsible, they're environmentally friendly, that aren't causing all these problems. And it's going to be, unfortunately, public outcry, lagging sales, because the only thing a manufacturer can understand is sales of product. If their ROI isn't there to be, and with any manufacturer, whether you make a green product or you make a product that is contentious, if the sales aren't there and nobody's buying it, nobody will buy it, nobody will use it, it's ineffective. If we live in an instant download society where if that rodent problem isn't gone in 24 hours, they're calling you and saying, you put out the station, how come you haven't caught anything? People don't realize that how long it takes for a rodent to go into a brand new station. They don't understand this. They don't understand rodent biology, that you put out a station, it could be 14 hours before that rodent even attempts to go in there. 24 hours, 72 hours. You don't know that. So the idea is that there has to be a market. And look what happened I was an early adopter to 25Bs. And how many of these lines get sold off because they couldn't make money at it? People were clamoring. Everybody, the news said 50% of people want it. Only 4% were buying it. It's still only about 12% today. Very few people know how to use it. Nobody has the patience to wait. Nobody wants to do the exclusion work. That's expensive. They want an instant fix with a rodenticide. Why would I pay $1,000 to fix something when I could just kill it and use a $16 rodenticide, or charge a company to charge me $200 to come out and put stations? Why would I spend $1,000? That's where it comes down to, is what is it going to cost people to do things right, and what is it going to cost people to do it quick and cheap? And it's always that pressure that we're under in the industry, that we got to satisfy the customer. The customer wants it quick and cheap. And a lot of the things that we can't do in this industry is quick and cheap. So think about that. Think about getting more involved. Think about getting involved with the science, looking at the options that are going to be available. And only manufacturers can control whether they release a third generation. New products are coming out. And what happens with our industry, guys, and I'm urging you to become early adopters in new technology. Accept it quickly. Why? Because if you accept it quickly, you can learn how to use it to your advantage. You can be the first to be using that technology. Get that business for yourself. A lot of people say, well, it just doesn't work as quickly or as good as the OSA, but there's a market for it. Become an early adopter trying it first. Don't say, how long has it taken? It took over 10 years for roach bait to even catch on. And still there are people today going, roach bait? No, I want to do flushing, with pyrethrum, and I want to use an Actazol, and we're going to go in there, we're going to basically hose the kitchen down. And you don't need to. You see, it's that resistance to change that doesn't allow this industry to move forward, because if you're not buying the products, if you're not buying the modern products, and we're going to get into modern products in another podcast, probably next week or the week after that, on what are the modern products coming out for rodenticides, for rodent control. What's out there? What's available? What can be done? There are options. And your job as a professional is to give your customer options. You might not be able to sell the $1,000 exclusion that solves the problem permanently for them. Instead of selling them rodent stations or rodenticide or another type of method that they continue to have the problem year after year. So again, I am a firm believer in integrated pest management as a tool for diagnosing and determining what the lowest impact service is going to be and what is best for the client. It isn't about being a chemical user. That would be totally hypocritical of me because I could never do it. But we've proven that we can reduce greatly the amount of pesticide use compared to other companies, and we have an advantage. So I believe that we need to embrace integrated pest management, and the new term for integrated pest management, I believe, is going to be holistic pest management, where it takes into account the person, it takes into account the property, the pets, the people, the planet, the plants, and the pest and the diseases those pests can bring. And we can do it. We've been doing it. We're proof that it can be done. There are other companies doing it. There are other companies that know how to do it and are doing it. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts in your mind. Feel free, please, to go over to the Pest Geek Podcast listeners group. If you're a professional, sign up. If you're not a professional and you're listening to me, we have created 3 groups called Pest Pro Local. And Pest Pro Local is for local people to get and create a group where local people can have a discussion with their local clients on a platform. And that the local pest control company can give, a good information to contradict the amount of bad information that is out there. I'm doing something about it. I'm dealing with these issues. I'm stepping out and putting my name and my reputation on the line to influence a lot of the change that needs to happen. Whether I succeed or not, it doesn't matter. A lot of the times it's the idea. And creating groups where locally, we've created 3 of them. Pest Pro Local Florida, Pest Pro Local Texas, and Pest Pro Local California. Those are the major markets where we're probably going to get the most interaction from. And what I'm wanting to do is 3 test markets on getting local people who are homeowners and residents to be able to have the dialogue with companies that have the patience to do this and to interact with them and say, listen, I'm not trying to sell you a product. I'm here if you need me. But in my opinion, I would not do this. I would not do that. I would do this. I mean, especially in bedbug. There's big bedbug group. People can't afford $2,000 to do a bedbug job. And I'm going to go do a job this week for a little old man who is sick, who is on a respirator machine. He's got roaches. He's afraid because he's got so many respiratory problems that to have a company go in there and spray. So he bought a vacuum. He's vacuuming up roaches every day. And very few people want to go in there and do the pest control for him in Miami. They don't want to take the risk. We can do stuff like that. We do it all the time. We do clinics. We do surgery centers. We do places that most people don't want to do. And we're highly niched in that area to do it. So, there are ways. There are ways to deal with this. There are ways to go around it. Figure it out. Just thought I'd let you know that. And until next time, hey guys, have a pestacular day.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.